Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Um, I have a task to share with you the outlook of agriculture and food processing sector, global outlook. The fact of the matter is that we believe that India is such a great opportunity as far as the sector is concerned, that global business is small and is likely to remain not that relevant. However, there are certain sectors where it becomes very, very critical. So if you were to look at the year gone by, it was one of the strongest El Nino events recorded and leading to dry weather in Southeast Asia and several parts of Brazil and Argentina. And we find that for two sectors, and particularly palm oil, which is fairly relevant to this country because we are one of the largest importers of palm oil, and we have seen an upsurge of 12%. Of course, Siraj is the expert and he'll tell us what is likely to happen in the future. We are hoping that these should come down. But this impacts the entire, because almost every part of food processing end up using oil. If you look at the outlook, I think whether you look at from the demand side, and you could have in terms of growing population, in terms of growing income, but I think another very important aspect happens is the biofuel demand. And that is an implication of what happens to as far as the oil prices are concerned. And if the oil prices go up, the demand for biofuel goes up, and therefore there is an impact in terms of the commodity prices. There is, of course, always the challenge of weather, being a food and agri area, as well as in terms of government responses. But we believe that three areas, both in terms of economic scenario, energy outlook, as well as currency dynamics, is something that has an implication in terms of the agri outlook. The economic scenario from as per IMF is projected to pick up pace. But of course, the uncertainty about US policies, as well as protectionism, and we said we could be living in this multiple D world of demonetization, deleveraging, deglobalization, depopulation, as well as de-democratization. In terms of energy, I talked about the implication it has as far as biodiesel is concerned, and we are seeing some firming up of the oil prices. In terms of currency, we have seen, we expect certain impact in the 4 Rs of Brazilian real and ringgit as rupiah, as well as rupee, likely to get to be depreciated in the next year. In terms of food grains, there is a positivity. There is an expectation of an increase by about 4% in the 3 large traded crops of corn, wheat, and rice. We expect wheat production to be up by 2.3%, corn by 8%, and rice by 1.7%. The global sugar production, which is also expected to increase by 3%, and the oil seeds by about 6%. Having said that, what is important to look at is in terms of what is happening from a demand perspective, and therefore what is happening to the global packaged food industry. And we are seeing that there are certain sectors, the growth is pretty good in terms of bakery, dairy, confectionery, chilled food, snacks, sauces, oils, and fats, which account for 75%. The important point, however, to note is that when you look at the global packaged players, the top 15 players account for less than 20%. I don't think in many industry where you will look at the top 15 players, normally they would account for 60, 70% of any industry that you look at. But when it comes down to food, they account to less than 20% share. So what it shows is that there is a great opportunity for local players to make a difference as far as the food area is concerned, and the big giants have not been able to come and capture, and here I'm not talking about beverages and Coke and Pepsi, but I'm talking about packaged food. And therefore India is a great advantage in terms of production, in terms of livestock population, in terms of rising consumption expenditure being a very, very important area. And we believe that food processing, which is positioned at the intersection of agri and industry, has a multi-dimensional impact on the economy. It enhances farm income, reduces massive agri-produce wastages, encourages sustainable agriculture, enables value creation through the manufacture of packaged foods, generates huge employment opportunities, drives investment, in cold chains and storage, as well as manages supply-side food inflation, which has been a major concern in recent times. From a demand perspective, the opportunity comes in because branded packaged food is just about 12% of the total food market, and there is a huge sector which is at unbranded or unorganized, and a great opportunity to shift that. And even if you look at some of the top three segments, if you look at staples, only 3% is organized. If you look at dairy, only 16% is organized. And if you look at oil, only 40% is organized. And this is an example of share of the way the consumer spends his income. And most importantly, I think the reason why we believe that the food sector will grow and continue to grow is apart from the fact that people will have more disposable income and more money, I think the exposure, the need to look at health areas, the need of looking at in terms of depending upon lifestyle. So we believe that the opportunity to actually create innovative solutions in this food space will be another great opportunity for us to move forward. Now, how to make it happen is something over the next 1 hour that we will be deliberating and discussing. So thank you very much.
Sets the context, doesn't it? Thank you so much, Hemant Malik, for the opening remarks. Time for the keynote address, for which I would like to invite Siraj Chaudhary, Chairman, Cargill India Private Limited.
Good morning, and thank you, Hemant, for laying out the landscape for food and how it's shaping up. I think very well shared in terms of what we see happening in the food space and the industry as it's evolving. I would try and bring this down to what can Karnataka do to join this party that is beginning to happen, which is the growth in the food processing industry. We, in the days gone by, we used to refer to Punjab as the granary of India. When looking at what Karnataka can offer, I would say Karnataka can be the grocery store for the country. And the reason is very clear. With 10 agri-climatic zones, Karnataka today produces just about everything that is being consumed in our homes. So from cereals like paddy, corn, to oilseeds, sugar cane, spices, vegetables, fruits, flowers, silk, wine, and fisheries and dairy. So if the whole gamut of food that goes into a home is being produced in Karnataka. And, but despite that, it's something which has kind of not got to the surface, the visibility that is required. And I think the reason for that, and we were discussing it before coming into this room, is that there is so much spotlight on so many other things that happen in Karnataka, and particularly around Bangalore, which is really the IT industry, the knowledge industry, the auto industry, the engineering industry, that this potential, which is significant in terms of agri and food in Karnataka, falls outside the spotlight. And I mean, if such potential existed in some of the other states of the country, they would be really, the focus of the government, the industry in those states. But here, unfortunately, or fortunately, I would say, the focus is on a lot of other things. And of course, food processing as an industry has kind of come alive only in the last 10, 15 years. And therefore, the potential that stays ahead or lies ahead of us is very large. And as Hemant mentioned, we talk about most other industries, there are few big players, and that's what is called the industry. In the case of food processing, it is very few big players and thousands of small players. I mean, the number of food processing units in Karnataka is close to 55,000 players. I mean, mostly under MSME and the small scale. I mean, they are the big players, some of them sitting in front of you, but most of them are really small players. And therefore, somewhere that spotlight, that support that needs to come to them is probably not as forthcoming. Now, while the big industry is really essential for generating employment, for the GDP growth, But the reality is that for a country as large as ours, and where a large population is staying in the rural areas, I think promotion of food and agri-processing is critical to generate that employment, and more importantly, to create or generate that employment in the rural areas. Specific to Karnataka, one of the challenges that we face as we grow our businesses in the state is land, because everybody wants to be close to Bangalore, and there's only so much that you can do around Bangalore, and therefore the need for industry to shift out and get into the hinterland. Not many industries would want to go there. One, for attracting talent. Second, for the infrastructure. A lot of these industries are very power dependent, and all those elements come into play. So one industry which can actually work to bring about that balance between urban and rural income growth and prosperity is really food processing. And I think that's one of the reasons that we should be, or the government here should be, looking at it a little more, with a little more focus, not to say that they don't have it, but I'm saying more of it, because the benefits, the industry may not come out with headlines or headline-grabbing announcements of 10,000 crores of investment or 5,000 crores of investment. The investments may still be 50 crores, 70 crores, but imagine the opportunity it provides to young entrepreneurs, to people who are working in the rural areas, to generate employment, to create their own startups. And particularly in Karnataka, where I said this, I mean, if you were in a state, say in the north, where it was only wheat or mustard, or somewhere where there's only paddy, there is only so much that an entrepreneur can do with those commodities. But here, from every specific spice to fruit to vegetable to flowers to silk to fishes, an individual has an opportunity to grow their own business much more with much more diversity of opportunity, I would say. So what are some of the challenges? And Mr. Maheshwar Rao is here with us, and we have, fortunately with us, a panel which actually represents the whole food and agri value chain, from an agricultural commodity company to a food scientist to a food processing company to someone who deals with food parks to cold storage and to retail. So it's the whole gamut of players, and we will be discussing all those elements of a food chain. But I think looking specific to Karnataka, a few things which we would want the government to probably lay more emphasis on is, land is certainly a challenge, so we will have to create those areas. Now, there has been attempt, and when I read the government the policies, there are a number of food parks which have been sanctioned, and maybe we would want to know more in terms of how the progress has been. The other very recent challenge that the industry is facing, and I think agriculture is facing, is water shortage. Now, we can be blaming it on the weather gods, and they may not have been very kind to the state, but that is not, there's no way to assume that they will be kinder in the future. So we will have to take or make greater efforts to control that element of our destiny which is linked to water. And therefore, there is need to encourage more technology in both agri-cultivation as well as agri-processing. The third, of course, is talent, where we see a challenge because, there's a lot of talent, but it is getting attracted to some more fancy and, better working conditions, I would say. Imagine working in a field with the farmers relative to sitting in an air-conditioned office, and, the blue-collar, white-collar divide. So I think those are some of the challenges, but I think given the need for employment, given the need for food, they can be overcome. The whole purpose of what I'm saying here is that we need to take food processing out of a mindset which says that this is food which is perhaps not as essential, which is sometimes labeled as junk food, which is sometimes seen as unhealthy, and take that piece out and start viewing food processing as an industry which actually adds value to agriculture, without which, and there are two elements. So while we keep talking about food processing, it doesn't mean that everything has to be processed. It is also about food being moved, or crops being moved from where they are produced to the consumer. So it is about fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and the whole value chain that is involved in carrying that crop from the farmer to the retail stores or to the consumers. So these are essential elements, and so this is not about rich man's food. It is not about food which is not good for health, but it is a necessity. It is a vehicle that converts agriculture to agribusiness, and in that process creates employment, creates healthy food, which is in terms of preserving it, allows food to travel large distances at an economical cost. I mean, the cost of food would have been phenomenal if we did not have this value chain in place. So while we discuss this as we go forward with the experts, I'll essentially leave you with the thought that we are today sitting in a state which has a huge potential, which has yet to be realized. And first step is to start looking at it as an industry which does not have 10 big names, but 50,000 small names that can help it grow, the employment it generates, and the status it provides to the state of Karnataka as the grocery store for the country. Thank you.